Hello, and welcome to the HCSIS Investigations System Change Training Session. Before we begin, please note that this training is only intended for investigation staff and only covers changes to investigations implemented on April 28, 2023. If you are an area office or facility staff member, there is a separate training for you uploaded to DDS Learning. Moving on into our agenda, today we will begin with an intro about this investigation release, and then we will move into each content section. We will cover changes in intake, involved parties, disposition and case assignment, initial response, and investigation report. We will then cover the investigation checklist, changing documents and forms, new documents and forms, appeals, and management reports. We will end the training by covering important scenarios and next steps prior to system changes going live. Please note that the processes we will cover today are not exhaustive of all the investigation functions you can perform in HCSIS. Our focus is on the functionalities that will have changes in this release. Each section will be followed by walkthrough demonstrations or screenshots of the changes discussed in HCSIS. By the end of today's training, you will be able to recognize the new intake PDF upload process as a change to the HCSIS Investigations module, distinguish between the process for screened in versus screened out investigation reports, identify and use new documents and forms, such as the Protective Services Request Form and Change in Disposition Request Form, and finally, recognize changes to the system after go live and be able to perform investigations functions. The main goal of the investigations module enhancements is to facilitate easier completion of investigations activities for DDS users. These enhancements are designed to improve efficiencies in data documentation. As we go along today, we will discuss changes in the system that are implemented to support DDS's mission, which will streamline user experience, offer new document integration, and increase data integrity. Let's discuss the investigation submodule within HCSIS. This diagram probably looks familiar to you. Investigations falls within the quality management module. This training will cover the investigations processes listed in the third row in yellow. Steps not listed here are covered in a separate training specifically for area office and facility staff. Let's start with the intake. Please note, all changes to the system will be called out in yellow throughout this presentation. The process of uploading an intake will be updated to support the upload of a PDF intake file in addition to the current CSV version. The process and requirement to upload a CSV intake file will remain the same. You will also be able to upload the intake as a PDF file to HCSIS. Uploading a PDF intake file is critical and will make your job easier because it will be available in a viewable clipboard tool in HCSIS, allowing you to reference the intake across multiple screens and forms to ease the process of completing fields based on information found in the intake. This flowchart depicts the updated process of uploading an intake with the new PDF upload option. The Program Coordinator 1 is primarily responsible for uploading a CSV intake file. Additionally, the Senior Investigator, Central Office Investigation Staff, and Regional Office Investigation Staff may upload the PDF version of the intake file. Here are the steps required to upload an intake file. First, DPPC creates and sends the intake to you all as a CSV and PDF file. Next, upload the CSV file to HCSIS via the CSV intake upload screen. Then, navigate to the DPPC intake information screen and upload the PDF version of the intake using the upload button. We'll demonstrate how to do this during our demo. The intake screen will display the PDF intake and certain fields from the CSV file. Finally, review the intake information and assign the intake to an investigations office. We will now walk through the process of uploading an intake in HCSIS. In order to upload intakes, we must first navigate to the CSV intake upload screen. To do so from the HCSIS homepage, click QM, Investigations, and then CSV intake upload. Now that we are on the CSV upload screen, let's upload our desired intakes from our computer by clicking the Browse button. We can select our desired file. Here on the intake processing table, we can see the two different intakes included in the CSV that we just uploaded. It lists the date of upload, the version, and that there are no errors in the files preventing intake upload. If there were errors in the file that would prevent it from uploading properly, the status column would contain a red X. Now that we've reviewed the intake processing table, we can officially upload the intakes to HCSIS by clicking Upload. Now that we have successfully uploaded the CSV versions of the intakes, we can navigate to the DPPC intake information screen for one of the intakes by navigating to the intake/search screen and searching for one of our intakes, numbers 996431. Usually, you would use alerts to navigate to the desired intake. You'd receive an alert when an intake is uploaded, and you would click the hyperlink for that alert to be navigated to the DPPC intake information screen. However, since we're using a test environment, and since the intake/case search screen has been updated, we'll navigate to the DPPC intake information screen through that pathway. So now we can use the intake number 996431, to search for our intake. Since we've searched for the intake using its exact intake number, we have been navigated directly to the DPPC intake information screen. From this screen, we can review the intake information pulled from the uploaded CSV file. From this screen, we can also upload the PDF version of the intake file. By clicking Browse, we can once again choose our desired file from our computer. In the PDF preview, the intake file and information within is now available as a viewable PDF within HCSIS. We can review the information in the PDF preview, and after we are finished, we can assign the intake to an investigations office. Let's select Southeast from the drop-down menu and click Assign. Since the intake has been successfully uploaded and assigned an investigations office, HCSIS has navigated us to the Involved Parties screen. Now we can head back to our deck to cover involved parties. We'll now move on to the Involved Parties section of the training. In this release, the Involved Parties screen and flow have changed to better streamline the process of linking involved parties and providers. The screen flow will stem from an Involved Parties summary screen, where you may link involved parties and providers. Additionally, the flow of linking provider locations has been simplified into one screen for ease of completion. To enhance data integrity, you will now be able to delete duplicate individuals on the Linking Involved Parties screen. You would use this function when more than one record exists for the same individual. The ability to delete duplicate individuals only applies to alleged abusers and reporters. Individuals listed in Meditech will not be available for deletion. The new clipboard function will allow you to reference the PDF intake and/or investigation report on screens where you need to complete fields based on information from that document. On the Involved Party screen specifically, some fields will pre-populate from the CSV version of the intake. This function will work if a PDF intake file was uploaded as previously demonstrated during the system demo. In order to link involved parties and providers, there are a number of steps that you must take in the system. The Office Support Specialist, Program Coordinator 1, and Senior Investigator are primarily responsible for linking involved parties. Please note that these steps do not need to occur in the order outlined in this chart. You will link involved parties listed in the intake to existing parties in HCSIS via the Edit Involved Parties screen. If there are involved parties who are not listed in the intake, you will add and link them as necessary. You will link providers listed in the intake to existing providers in HCSIS and edit the site location of abuse if necessary. You will also clean up eligible entries by deleting duplicate individuals if necessary. After these steps are completed, you will link the intake to an existing case and/or create the case and assign it to an area or facility office. Otherwise, you will administratively close the intake. This table lists which screens the clipboard tool will be available for and which documents will be available for each screen. For example, on each screen of the involved parties flow, the intake and screened-in investigation report will be available on the clipboard if they were previously uploaded. The clipboard tool will only be available on certain screens, and the documents included in the tool will depend on their relevance to the case and associated screens. For example, the involved party screens will have both the intake and screened-in investigation report PDFs available, whereas the protective service request form screen will only have the intake PDF available. The process of uploading the investigation report to the clipboard will be covered later in this training. We will also cover the differences in the investigation checklist based on disposition and screening decision of the case. Now we'll switch to HCSIS to demonstrate the linking involved parties updated process as well as the clipboard tool. As you may remember, after we assigned the intake to an investigations office, we were navigated to the involved parties summary screen. We are on that screen now. From the involved parties summary screen, we are able to view which parties and providers are linked to the case. In this example, no involved parties are yet linked. Note that this screen is different than it currently appears in the system. Rather than unlinked involved parties appearing on this screen as in the current system, this screen only lists linked involved parties, which is why no parties are currently listed on this screen. From the linking involved parties summary screen, we can also link the intake to an existing case, create a new case, or administratively close the intake using the 3 buttons at the bottom of the screen. First, we will demonstrate how to link involved parties to the case using the new process flow. To do this, let's click the Add/Edit Details button above the linked involved parties table to navigate to the Edit Involved Parties screen. We have been navigated to the Edit Involved Parties screen, where we can view parties listed in the intake CSV that are not yet linked to individuals in HCSIS. From here, we can link the involved parties to existing individuals in HCSIS by selecting the radio button next to the desired unlinked party and clicking the View Perspective Matches button. Let's do this for our alleged victim. On the View Prospective Matches screen, you may review the list of prospective matches and determine if any match corresponds to the chosen unlinked individual. If the correct individual does not appear in the results, you may enter known demographic information about the individual into the search box and click Search to view more prospective matches. In this case, Dontesta Woodridge matches the individual listed within prospective matches. We will select the radio button next to their name and click Link to link the correct individual. The system has navigated us back to the Involved Parties screen, showing that Dontesta Woodridge has been added to the linked Involved Parties table. In some incidences, you may need to add a new involved party who wasn't listed in the intake. For example, if a new and/or different alleged abuser or alleged victim is discovered during the initial response, then they need to be added to the Edit Involved Parties screen. In order to do so, let's click the Add New Involved Party button. This will navigate us to the Add New Involved Party screen, where we can select the desired involved party type from the dropdown and demographic information for the individual in order to search for prospective matches. Let's say that we need to add an individual who is an alleged abuser named Marianne Test Allen, who is a female born on May 28, 1971. Now that we've entered that information, we can click View Prospective Matches. All of the prospective matches for the party we wish to add and link appear on the screen. If the desired individual is not listed in any of the prospective matches, they may need to have a record created in HCSIS. For alleged abusers and reporters, this can be done by clicking the Add button above the prospective matches table. Note that this is only possible for alleged abusers and reporters because records for alleged abusers and reporters are not pulled in from Meditech. On the other hand, if an alleged victim, other individual, or provider does not exist in HCSIS, they will need to be added to Meditech in order to be pulled into HCSIS. Contact the HCSIS help desk in order to have them added to Meditech. Also note that this ability to add an alleged abuser or reporter to HCSIS, as well as the retrieval of records from Meditech, is an existing functionality that will not be changing in this release. For our purposes, we'll say that the correct Marianne Test Allen is within the prospective matches. However, the two results for Marianne Test Allen appear to be duplicates, containing most of the same demographic information and only a slightly different name. They have the same date of birth, gender, and address, but have slightly different names listed. This suggests that these are duplicate entries. We can delete one of these entries and clean up our results by using the duplicate deletion feature. Let's click the Clean Up button above the Prospective Matches table to do so. We are now on the Search Results Cleanup screen, where we can delete one of the duplicate entries. Let's select the radio button next to the second entry listed for Marianne Test, and we can click Delete. When deleting duplicate entries, make sure that you are only selecting the duplicate entry and that you are absolutely sure it is a duplicate, because once the duplicate entry is deleted, it cannot be undone. For that reason, this pop-up will appear in order to confirm that we are absolutely sure we want to delete the entry. As we're certain that this is a duplicate Marianne Test Allen entry, we can click Yes to continue. Now that the duplicate entry has been deleted, we can proceed with linking the remaining Marianne Test entry to the intake by selecting the radio button next to the entry and clicking Link. Now back on the Edit Involved Parties screen, we can see that our individual has been added to the linked Involved Parties table. Next, we'll return to the Involved Parties summary screen to demonstrate how to link a provider. To link a provider, we'll first click the Add/Edit Details button above the linked provider table. Let's select the radio button next to our unlinked provider, Sunshine Village Incorporated, and click View Prospective Matches. Let's select the provider name, Sunshine Village, from the provider name dropdown. This pre-populates the corporate address based on information correlated with Sunshine Village. Next, let's choose a responsible site from the dropdown. We'll choose 65 Springfield Street. As shown, the location of abuse has been pre-populated from the intake CSV. However, this address is a different address from the responsible site that we just entered. Because these are two different addresses, we can check our clipboard tool to match it for accuracy. We can view the intake PDF on the DPPC intake tab of the clipboard tool. Here, all information found in the PDF intake is viewable. If we scroll down, we can find the location of abuse as HCSIS 9 Street, Fall River, Massachusetts, and that one matches the location that has been pre-populated into our location of abuse text box, so we do not need to make any changes. We can go ahead and close the clipboard and link this provider. Once we have all of our involved parties and providers linked, we can link to an existing case or create a case. Let's go back to the involved parties summary screen to do this. In order to create a new case, at least one alleged victim must be linked, and the intake PDF must be uploaded. We can also administratively close the intake by clicking the Administratively Close button at the bottom of the screen. An intake does not need any parties or providers linked in order to be administratively closed. Let's click the Create a Case button, which will take us to the Area/Facility Selection screen, where we can assign our newly created case to the corresponding area or facility. On the Area/Facility dropdown, the area office has been pre-populated as Fall River. This corresponds to the area office of the primary alleged victim that we previously linked. You may edit the area or facility office from this dropdown, but for our purposes, we'll say that this is the correct office and we will click Continue. Once we click Continue, we are navigated to the switchboard for our newly created case. Now that we've walked through the process of linking involved parties and created our new case, let's return to the training deck. Our next section covers assigning dispositions. In this table, we have all dispositions that are available for assignment. The dispositions listed in blue are not new to the system, but highlighted in yellow is the Fraud Inquiry Administrative Review disposition, which will be added to the system with this release. The Fraud Inquiry Administrative Review disposition is designed for cases that do not meet regulatory requirements for a fraud inquiry by investigations, but where a review of the case is still required by the Bureau of Program Integrity, or BPI. The inclusion of this disposition type will also streamline the search to identify fraud cases that require a review by BPI. The overall process of assigning a disposition is remaining mostly the same, with some updates displayed in this graphic. The senior investigator is primarily responsible for assigning a disposition, and the program coordinator 1 and office support specialist may also assign a disposition. After the case is created, HCSIS navigates you from the involved party screen to the switchboard, as we demonstrated in our previous demo. While on the switchboard, click the Create hyperlink under the disposition header to navigate to the disposition screen. Select the desired disposition from the drop-down menu, which now includes Fraud Inquiry Administrative Review. Enter the disposition date and any other conditionally mandatory fields based on the chosen disposition. Once all information is entered, finalize the disposition. Finally, if the assigned disposition requires an investigator, you will be navigated to the case assignment screen. Otherwise, you will be navigated to the switchboard. In this screenshot of the disposition screen, we chose the DDS to investigate disposition. Based on that disposition, the dropdown for "Is the investigator required to complete the Title 19 5-day form?" appears on the screen with a red asterisk. Depending on the disposition you select, different mandatory fields will become available. As you might recall previously, all conditionally mandatory fields were listed on the screen, regardless of the field's relevance to the selected disposition, but now the prompts will be specific and relevant based on your selection. We'll now move on to our fourth section, which covers uploading an initial response. An initial response will only apply to screened-in cases with the following dispositions: defer to law enforcement, DPPC to investigate; defer to law enforcement, DDS to investigate; DPPC to investigate; and DDS to investigate. As in the current system, you will receive the initial response from DPPC or retrieve it from the DPPC database. In this new release, rather than manually entering the initial response into HCSIS, you will upload the PDF initial response directly to HCSIS via the switchboard. The initial response PDF will not be editable within HCSIS, but you may upload multiple versions of the document. Once uploaded, the initial response PDF will be accessible via notices. The senior investigator and investigator are primarily responsible for uploading the initial response. In the new process of uploading an initial response, the first step remains the same as the current system. You will receive the initial response from DPPC or retrieve it from the DPPC database. Then, you will upload the initial response as a PDF to the switchboard. Unlike the current process, there will be no submission or approval of the initial response within HCSIS. The initial response will be uneditable and downloadable from notices, and multiple versions may be uploaded. An initial response closure may be indicated on the initial response. If an initial response closure is received, navigate to the disposition screen and select the Initial Response Closure checkbox. It's critical that you document an initial response closure in the system upon receipt, because this will change the available dispositions for the case. Once the initial response closure checkbox is checked, the dispositions DPPC to investigate and defer to law enforcement, DPPC to investigate, will become unavailable on the disposition screen. If the case previously had one of those two dispositions, then you must choose a new disposition. The process of documenting an initial response closure and updating the disposition to reflect it is as follows. The senior investigator and investigator may upload an initial response closure and update the disposition. Upload the initial response containing an initial response closure as a PDF to HCSIS in the same manner as an initial response. Click Update Disposition on the switchboard and select the Initial Response Closure checkbox once on the disposition screen. Once the Initial Response Closure checkbox is checked and the disposition is finalized, you will be unable to change the response to the Initial Response checkbox. So make sure that you are certain that an initial response closure was received before checking the box. Change the disposition if necessary and finalize the disposition. Now we'll switch over into HCSIS to demo the initial response and initial response closure. From the switchboard, let's click Upload under the initial response header to upload the initial response. We are now on the initial response upload screen. We'll click Browse and select the initial response PDF from our computer. We can upload the file to HCSIS by clicking Upload. Now that the initial response has been successfully uploaded to the system, we'll click Continue to navigate back to the switchboard. We can download and view the initial response we've just uploaded from the Notices screen. Let's click the Notices tab and download the initial response to demonstrate this option. We can find the initial response under the Notices tab, along with today's date as the date generated, and an option to print. We can download the initial response by clicking the PDF icon under the print column. But for now, we'll just head back to the switchboard. Let's say that an initial response closure was indicated in the initial response we just uploaded. Now we'll have to indicate that on the disposition. We'll click Update Disposition under the disposition header to navigate to the disposition screen. On the disposition screen, we'll say that we need to change our disposition to administrative review based on the content of the initial response closure, and we'll select that option from the dropdown. And we can click Yes on this confirmation message. Note that dismissed and resolved fairly and efficiently are also common dispositions you may need to change after receiving an initial response closure. For the prompt, is there an initial response closure? We'll check the box. And now we can click Finalize. And it looks like we didn't have a disposition explanation at first, so we can enter some text and click Finalize. The system navigated us back to the switchboard, which has been updated to reflect the new administrative review disposition that we chose. Now we'll switch back to the training deck. In section 5, we'll cover the investigation report. An investigation report is only relevant to cases with the following dispositions: defer to law enforcement DDS to investigate, DDS to investigate, defer to law enforcement DPPC to investigate, DPPC to investigate, and fraud inquiry. In this new release, you must upload the investigation report for screened-in cases as a PDF to HCSIS. The PDF itself will be read-only. However, the fields reported allegation and basis for conclusion will appear on the investigation report screen, and you must complete these fields with responses found in the investigation report PDF. For screened out cases, the process of completing an investigation report within HCSIS will remain the same as it currently is within the system. However, certain fields and screens will be updated to better reflect your workflow. This diagram illustrates which cases will follow the existing process of creating an investigation report in HCSIS and which will require upload of a read-only PDF investigation report. Since the dispositions DPPC to investigate and defer to law enforcement DPPC to investigate are always screened in, cases with these dispositions will always require an upload of the investigation report. However, since DDS to investigate and defer to law enforcement DDS to investigate can be either screened in or screened out, cases with these dispositions may follow either the existing or new investigation report process based on their screening decision. For example, if a case has the disposition DDS to investigate and is screened out, then it will follow the existing investigation report process. Cases with the fraud inquiry disposition are screened out only, and as such, will follow the existing investigation report process. The process of completing a screened out investigation report is very similar to the current system functionality, with some updates. The investigator is primarily responsible for submitting the report, and the senior investigator is primarily responsible for editing and finalizing the report, but may also create the report. First, create the investigation report from the switchboard. Then, complete mandatory fields on each screen. We will cover changes to screens and fields in the next few slides. Submit the report to the senior investigator for approval. If you are a senior investigator, make edits to the report as needed or unsubmit the report in order to send it back to the investigator for additional edits. Once the report is satisfactory, the senior investigator finalizes the report. Some screens will be consolidated and renamed to better reflect your business processes. For example, the dropdown on the left shows all available investigation report screens in the current system, and the dropdown on the right shows the updated list of screens available for screened out investigation reports in the updated system. As shown on the right, screens have been consolidated and references to 19C conclusions have been removed in the updated screen list. Additionally, in the new release, you will have the ability to unsubmit a screened out investigation report from the criminal proceedings screen using the Unsubmit button highlighted on the slide. Note that the criminal proceedings screen is the last screen in the investigation report. For screened-in investigation reports, the process has significantly changed and now consists of uploading the report to HCSIS as a PDF document. The senior investigator and investigator may upload the screened-in investigation report. First, you will click the Upload Investigation Report hyperlink on the switchboard. Next, select the investigation report PDF from your computer and upload it to HCSIS on the investigation report screen. Using investigation report PDF as saved to HCSIS, enter responses to the fields reported allegation and basis for conclusion on the investigation report screen. Note that you may only upload one version of the report. The report will not populate the involved parties screen as it currently does. You must manually update any additional involved parties included in the investigation report. You will now be able to create multiple versions of the investigation report extension. In order to align the system functionality with your workflow, the ability to update and create an extension will depend on the status of the investigation report. For screened out investigation reports, HCSIS will not allow the investigation report extension to be updated once the investigation report is finalized within HCSIS. For screened-in investigation reports, the system will no longer allow the investigation report extension to be updated or created once the PDF of the investigation report is uploaded to HCSIS. The investigation report extension can be created and finalized from the switchboard as it currently functions in the system. If an investigation report extension is approved and finalized, HCSIS will generate an investigation report extension request document, an investigation report extension notification document. These documents will be downloadable from the Notices screen. This slide shows how the investigation report extension request and investigation report extension notification appear on the Notices screen. Now we'll switch to HCSIS to walk through the process of uploading a screened-in investigation report and submitting an investigation report extension request. We are now on the switchboard for a screened-in case. From the switchboard, we can access the investigation report screen by clicking Upload under the investigation report header. However, let's say that we need more time to complete the investigation report. So first, we're going to submit an investigation report extension request. In the event where you may need more time to upload or complete an investigation report, you may submit an investigation report extension request from the switchboard by clicking Report Extension Create. Now we are on the extension detail screen where we can fill out the mandatory fields for reason, explanation, risk assessment, and expected completion date. We'll say that our reason is, I have been unable to review pertinent records. And we'll enter test into our explanation. We'll choose none from the risk assessment dropdown. And for the expected completion date, we'll enter May 27th, 2023. Now we can submit our extension request. And we've been navigated back to the switchboard. Since we're currently logged into HCSIS as a senior investigator, we can choose to approve or deny the request and finalize it by clicking the Report Extension Created Submitted link. Here, we can review the information entered previously and choose to either approve or deny the request using the Decision dropdown. Let's approve the request and finalize the extension by clicking the Finalize button. We could also unsubmit the extension, which would send it back one step to be edited by whomever originally submitted it. But for now, let's finalize the approved request. Now we've been navigated back to the switchboard, and the investigation report extension link has been updated to reflect that the extension was approved and that the expected completion date is May 27th. We can head to the Notices screen to see that the investigation report extension notification document and extension report request document are available to be downloaded. We can download the investigation report extension notification and take a look by opening it by clicking the print icon and opening it from our downloads. We can see that the notification has been populated with information we entered on the extension request screen, such as the expected completion date. Now let's head back to the switchboard to complete our investigation report. Let's say that we've received our investigation report and we can go ahead and upload it by clicking the Upload link. Here, unlike the investigation report screen for screened out cases, we have the option to browse for and upload an investigation report. Also, unlike screened out investigation reports, we only have the option to fill out 2 fields. Let's choose the investigation report PDF from our computer by clicking Browse and choosing it from our files. We can now review the PDF preview of the investigation report we just uploaded. Scrolling through the PDF, it shows all necessary information, included in the investigation report. We'll use the PDF preview to help us populate the fields allegation investigated and basis for conclusion. Let's find these fields in the PDF preview so we can populate the responses into the fields. At this point, we should review the responses that we've copied into the fields, and once we're sure they're accurate, click Upload to upload the investigation report and navigate back to the switchboard. HCSIS shows us that the investigation report was properly uploaded and the date that it has been uploaded. Unlike screened out investigation reports, the screened in report does not need to be finalized by the senior investigator, so the process is now complete. Note that once we upload the screened in investigation report to HCSIS, we may not update or delete it. However, we can use the View hyperlink to access the investigation report PDF from notices. Now let's head to the Involved Parties screen to demonstrate how the screened in report we've just uploaded has been added to the clipboard tool. By opening up our clipboard, we can now see that the screened in report has been added. Note that once we click the tab for the intake using the DPPC intake tab, the tab for the investigation report becomes hidden. In order to scroll back down to the investigation report tab, we can use the middle scroll bar to help us navigate back. And then we could click the investigation report tab again to view that tab. Now we can head back to our deck to cover the investigation checklist. The investigation checklist is mandatory for cases with the following dispositions: DDS to investigate, defer to law enforcement DDS to investigate, DPPC to investigate, defer to law enforcement DPPC to investigate, and no dispute to the facts. The screen flow and available prompts for the investigation checklist will be determined by a case's screening decision and disposition. As a result, the relevant conclusion screen will correspond with the regulatory code for the case. For example, the MGLC 19C conclusion screen will only appear for screened in cases, and the 115 CMR 9 conclusion screen will only appear for screened out cases. The editability of the allegation summary and conclusions fields will be determined by the case's screening decision and disposition. For example, for screened in cases, the allegation summary and MGLC 19C conclusions fields will be pre-populated from the investigation report and be editable. For screened out cases with an investigation report, fields will be pre-populated but will be uneditable. This graphic shows that for screened out cases with the dispositions DDS to investigate and defer to law enforcement DDS to investigate, the allegation summary and conclusions fields will be uneditable. However, for screened in cases with the dispositions DDS to investigate, defer to law enforcement DDS to investigate, defer to law enforcement TPPC to investigate, and DPPC to investigate, the allegation summary and conclusions fields will be editable. For cases with the disposition no dispute to the facts, the allegation summary and conclusions fields will be editable regardless of the case's screening decision. On the Categories of Abuse screen, for all categories of abuse that were previously selected in the nature of allegation, you must provide a response, either substantiated or unsubstantiated. For example, if verbal abuse was checked in the nature of allegation, then a response to the verbal abuse category of abuse dropdown in the investigation checklist is mandatory. We will demonstrate this in our next demo. The investigator and senior investigator are primarily responsible for completing the checklist, but the office support specialist and program coordinator 1 may also complete it. The senior investigator and investigator may finalize the checklist. In the updated system, create the investigation checklist after the investigation report or disposition for no dispute to the facts cases and the nature of allegation are completed. Then complete necessary fields on each screen included in the investigation checklist and provide responses for categories of abuse corresponding to the nature of allegation. Note that the checklist will have pre-populated fields from the investigation report, disposition letter, or intake, depending on the case's disposition and screening decision. Also note that you may use the clipboard tool to review and edit pre-populated allegation summary and conclusions fields for screened-in cases and cases with the disposition no dispute to the facts. After all necessary fields are completed on all screens, save the completed checklist, and if you're a senior investigator, review and finalize it. Now we'll switch to HCSIS to walk through the updated investigation checklist. We are now back on the switchboard for that same case that we just uploaded an investigation report for in the previous demo. From the switchboard, we can create the investigation checklist by clicking Create under the investigation checklist header. We've been navigated to the allegation summary screen. Since the case we're currently working with is screened in DDS to investigate, the allegation summary has been pre-populated but is still editable. Note that the allegation summary has been pre-populated with the text that we entered into the allegation investigated field in the investigation report. Let's say that the allegation was substantiated and that abuse did not occur during transportation. Since this is a screened-in case, we must also respond to the prompt were protective actions recommended. We will say no for this response. And we can click Save and Continue to move to our next screen. Since our case is screened in, the next screen in the progression is the MGLC 19C conclusion screen. If the case were screened out, it would be the 115 CMR 9 conclusion screen. Again, because our case is screened in, the MGLC 19C conclusion screen has been pre-populated and is editable. Note that like our previous screen, this screen and the conclusions field have been pre-populated from text we entered in our investigation report screen. We can click Save and Continue to move to the next screen in the progression. The next screen in the progression is the abuser information screen. On this screen, we'll enter all of the demographic information for the alleged abuser and whether or not the abuse was substantiated. The first and last name of our alleged abuser has been pre-populated from involved parties. Let's say that the position/relationship is nurse. The type is paid caretaker, and that the abuse is substantiated. Now that we've completed the abuser information, let's click Save and Continue to head to the next screen. The final screen in the investigation checklist is the categories of abuse screen. For our purposes, we'll say that the category of abuse, emotional abuse by caretaker, was chosen in the nature of allegation. Because this category of abuse was previously indicated, we can see that there is a red asterisk next to the emotional abuse by caretaker category, which tells us that it is mandatory and that we must choose a substantiation and subtypes for this category of abuse. If there were multiple categories of abuse indicated in the nature of allegation, then multiple mandatory categories will be indicated here. Note that you may also select substantiations and subtypes for categories of abuse that were not previously indicated in the nature of allegation, and that the nature of allegation will be updated to reflect the new categories of abuse selected in the investigation checklist. Let's say that emotional abuse by caretaker is substantiated under 19C, and that the subtype is threatening, physical abuse, or assault. Let's also say that during the course of the investigation, another category of abuse was discovered. We'll say verbal abuse. Even though verbal abuse wasn't indicated initially on the nature of allegation, we can choose a substantiation and subtypes for this category of abuse. We'll say that it is substantiated under 19C and that the subtype is teasing, name-calling, taunting individual. Let's finalize the investigation checklist and then go check to see if our additional category of abuse was updated in the nature of allegation. Note that we are currently logged in as a senior investigator, so we may immediately finalize the checklist. However, investigators would only be able to save the checklist. Under the investigation checklist header, we now have a link that says created on March 30th, 2023, finalized March 30th, 2023. Let's head to the nature of allegation to see if our added categories of abuse were updated. This shows that the categories of abuse have been updated to include verbal abuse. We'll head back to our training deck now to cover the decision letter and public log report. In this section, we'll cover various documents and forms that will be updated in this release. The decision letter and public log report have some changes made in the new release. Let's discuss those changes in more detail. The decision letter will be updated so that letters for screened out cases will only have 115 CMR 9.05 conclusions listed, and the letters for screened in cases will only have MGLC 19C conclusions listed. The conclusions fields will be populated into the decision letter from the investigation report or the investigation checklist, except for cases with the disposition resolved fairly and efficiently, which we will cover shortly. This is a screenshot of a decision letter for a screened in case. One thing to point out here is that the conclusions field has been updated to only display a header for the MGLC 19C conclusions, and all references to 115 CMR 9.05 conclusions have been removed. In this case, the conclusions field has been populated from responses entered in the allegation summary field of the investigation checklist that we showed in our last demo. On the other hand, this is a screenshot of the decision letter for a screened out case. Here, we only have the 115 CMR 9.05 regulatory conclusions reference, and all references to MGLC 19C conclusions have been removed. In this case, the conclusions field has been populated from responses entered in the allegation investigated field in the investigation report. For most dispositions, the only editable field on the decision letter screen will be the decision letter issue date. The rest of the fields in the decision letter will pre-populate from the investigation report and investigation checklist. However, because resolved fairly and efficiently cases do not have an investigation report or investigation checklist, you will be able to enter additional information on the decision letter screen that will populate into the decision letter. This screenshot of the decision letter screen shows that shows what the screen will look like for cases with the disposition resolved fairly and efficiently. There are editable fields for the allegation summary and 115 CMR 9 conclusions, as well as a date picker that appears for the other dispositions. Additionally, the clipboard tool will be available on the decision letter for resolve fairly and efficiently cases to aid in the completion of the allegation summary and 115 CMR 9 conclusions fields. You will be able to view the public log report from the notices screen as a case is updated. Additionally, report fields will be updated to better reflect case statuses available to the public through the report. For example, the final decision date field will be renamed to Decision Letter Issued Date. Here we have a screenshot of the updated public log report with new and updated fields called out. The final decision date field has been renamed to Decision Letter Issued Date. Additionally, the fields Resolution Letter Issued Date, Request for Reconsideration Filed, and Outcome of Reconsideration have been added to capture outcomes for cases that have a resolution letter rather than an action plan. Now let's recap some of the key points from our first set of sections. The first key point we covered was that intakes will be manually uploaded as read-only PDF documents and as CSV files. Next, you might recall that we discussed that the screen flow for involved parties will be updated and certain fields will be added and changed for provider linking. Finally, we talked about the screened in versus screened out investigation reports, whereas screened in investigation reports will be manually uploaded as read-only PDF documents. Screened out reports will continue to be created in HCSIS. Now we'll move on to cover new forms and tools that will be updated to HCSIS in this release. The new forms and tools in this release are the Rescreen Request Form, Protective Services Request Form, Change in Disposition Request Form, the Historical Forms and Notices screens, and the Covering Senior Investigator utility. The rescreen request form serves as a virtual record of a rescreen request. If available from DPPC, it must be uploaded as a PDF to HCSIS via the switchboard. Multiple versions may be uploaded from the rescreen request form upload screen, and the uploaded document may be viewed from notices. The investigator, senior investigator, investigations management, and central office investigation staff can upload and delete a rescreen request form. Here are two screenshots of the rescreen request form screen, which is accessible from the switchboard. Click Browse to select the rescreen request form PDF document from your computer. Once the form is saved to the rescreen request form screen, click Upload to upload the document to HCSIS. After it is uploaded, the form will be viewable from notices. The Protective Services request form is optional, and the investigator or senior investigator can create it and submit it in HCSIS. The senior investigator may finalize the form. The form is available for all finalized dispositions. Completing the form generates a letter, which is viewable from the notices screen. An alert will be sent to area office staff once the form is finalized, and they will be able to access the form in HCSIS. The investigator may complete and submit the Protective Services request form to the senior for finalization, and the senior investigator may complete and finalize the Protective Services request form. The process to create and finalize the Protective Services request form is as follows. After finalizing the disposition, click the Create hyperlink under the Protective Services request form header on the switchboard. The system will navigate you to the Protective Services request form screen, where you will complete mandatory fields, including the explanation of the circumstances. After mandatory fields are completed, submit the form if you are an investigator, and finalize the form if you are a senior investigator. A letter will be available in notices after the form is finalized. relevant recipients will receive an alert when the form is finalized. This is how the Protective Services Request Form screen will appear in HCSIS, with mandatory fields denoted by red asterisks. The allegation summary will be pre-populated into the Protective Services Request Form, but will be editable. Here is the Protective Services Request Form letter as it appears on the Notices screen and a redacted version of the letter when printed from Notices. The change in disposition request form is optional and may be completed by an investigator after the disposition is finalized. The form is available for the Defer to Law Enforcement, DDS to Investigate, and DDS to Investigate dispositions. The investigator must submit the form to the senior investigator for approval after completion. The senior investigator may approve or deny the request for a disposition change. The investigator and senior investigator will have access to the change in disposition request form screen. The process of submitting and approving or denying a change in disposition request form is as follows. Click the Create hyperlink under the Change in Disposition Request Form header on the switchboard. Complete necessary fields and submit the form for review, alerting the senior investigator. The senior investigator must approve or deny the request and finalize the form. Once the form is finalized, a printable version will be available on the Notices screen. Note that approving the form does not automatically change the disposition. You must still change it manually. Here is a screenshot of the Change in Disposition Request Form screen. Choose the requested disposition from the dropdown and provide a reason for the recommended disposition change. Click Submit to submit the change in disposition request form for review. Senior investigators must then approve or deny the requested change in disposition. Choose a decision to approve or deny from the decision dropdown and click Finalize. After the change in disposition request form is finalized, the change in disposition request notice will be accessible from Notices as a PDF. The document here includes information filled out on the change in disposition request form screen. The Historical Forms and Notices screens will allow users to download and view historical notices and forms that were previously completed but are no longer relevant to the case based on its current disposition. The notices and forms will be viewable but not editable. Access to various historical forms and notices will be available to users based on the existing access permissions. In this scenario, we can see that the previous disposition for the case was DDS to Investigate. The disposition was updated, and the notices listed in historical notices under DDS to Investigate are no longer relevant to the current disposition, but can still be printed and viewed as PDF or Word documents. Historical forms can be found under the same historical tab as historical notices. These are forms which existed for the case when it was assigned a DDS to Investigate disposition, but are no longer relevant to the current disposition. Unlike historical notices, historical forms cannot be printed as PDF or Word documents and are instead viewable only within HCSIS. The Covering Senior Investigator utility tool will allow senior investigators to assign coverage for their office to another senior investigator while they are out of office. This tool will replace the current process that requires the use of a separate HCSIS login. Only senior investigators and investigations management will be permitted to add or update coverage. However, all investigations roles will be able to view the information on the Covering Senior Investigator utility screen. Senior investigators and investigations management will have the ability to assign coverage through the Covering Senior Investigator utility. To use the Covering Senior Investigator utility, follow these steps. Navigate to the Covering Senior Investigator utility tool from the Investigations ribbon. On the Covering Senior Investigator utility screen, the system will pre-populate the name and office of the senior investigator seeking coverage. Choose a Covering Senior Investigator from the dropdown and assign dates. Please note that the Covering Senior Investigator's name will populate in all related fields for documents generated during coverage. Now we'll switch to HCSIS to demonstrate how to use the Covering Senior Investigator utility tool. Let's navigate to the Covering Senior Investigator utility by clicking QM, Investigations, and Covering Senior Investigator. Here, we can view the recent instances in which a senior investigator required coverage. The region, name of the senior investigator requesting coverage, name of the covering senior, the start and end dates for the coverage, the last person to make a change to the coverage, and the date the coverage was last changed are listed here. We can add coverage by clicking the Add button. Since we're logged in as a senior investigator, the senior investigator field has populated with our name, in this case, Maria Tess Allen. The system has also pre-populated our region as Southeast. Now, we can choose a senior investigator who will provide coverage for us from the dropdown. Perhaps we're going on vacation and need coverage for a week. Let's select Stephen Tess Jackson from the dropdown as our covering senior. And since we'll be gone on vacation for a week, let's make the start date May 1st and the end date May 8th. Now let's save our coverage by clicking the Save button. Our changes are now reflected in the table. It shows that our coverage window has been added and the dates for which we will be gone. The covering senior investigator will now be able to access our scope for the week-long duration that we set. We can also delete an entry for our coverage up to the start date using the Delete button. You may only delete your own entries. The View/Edit button allows us to edit the coverage, and you may only edit your own coverage entries. Let's head back to the training deck to cover appeals. In Section 9, we'll cover updates made to the appeals process. Appeals may only occur for cases with the following dispositions: DDS to investigate, defer to law enforcement, DDS to investigate, DPPC to investigate, defer to law enforcement, DPPC to investigate, no dispute to the facts, resolve fairly and efficiently, and dismissed. The party to complaint dropdown on the appeals screen will only contain options for alleged victim, alleged abuser, and guardian, as they are the only parties who may file an appeal. The appellant dropdown will pre-populate with the names of relevant involved parties based on the involved party type chosen in the party to complaint dropdown. For example, if the party to complaint is chosen as alleged victim, then only names of alleged victims linked to the case will pre-populate in the appellant dropdown. The action plan and investigation checklist are the only documents that can be updated via the appeals screen. Checkboxes referring to these forms will be available on the appeals screen if a reversed or reversed in part / affirmed in part decision is chosen. And the checkboxes shown on the screen will depend on the assigned disposition. For example, resolve fairly and efficiently will only show the action plan checkbox. The Program Coordinator 1 is primarily responsible for documenting an appeal. To document an appeal, first click the Create link under the appeal header on the switchboard. Choose the party to complaint and the appellant name from the respective dropdowns. Complete all other mandatory fields. Once mandatory fields are completed, save the appeal and navigate back to the switchboard. Once an appeal decision is received, record the decision by updating the appeal screen. If the appeal is reversed or affirmed in part/reversed in part, select the documents to update and finalize. The documents to be updated will then reopen on the switchboard for you to update per the appeal decision. Note that once an appeal is finalized, it will become read-only. However, you may unfinalize and edit the appeal using the Unfinalized button on the appeal screen. In the first screenshot, on the appeal screen under the appeal request header, the party to complaint dropdown will populate with only the alleged victim, alleged abuser, and guardian. In the second screenshot, it shows that once alleged victim is chosen as the party to complaint, only the names of alleged victims will be available in the dropdown. The documents to be updated checkboxes may include the action plan and/or investigation checklist depending on the case's disposition. Checking the box for a document will reopen it on the switchboard, and you must return to that document to update it manually. We will now go over new and updated management reports relevant to investigations. On the blue box on the left is a list of management reports that will not have any changes made to them in this release. The Outstanding Cases Report, Investigation Case Listing Report, and ACES report will all have changes, and 2 new management reports will be introduced in this release: the Investigation Statistics Report and Action Plan Resolution Letter Status Report. As mentioned, the Investigation Statistics Report and Action Plan Resolution Status Report, which is not to be confused with the Action Plan Resolution Report, will be introduced in this release. The Action Plan Resolution Status Report is used primarily by area office staff and will not be covered in depth in this training. Note that all management reports in investigations will now have Excel added as an output file format. The Excel files will contain the same fields as the PDF and Word output files, except where noted. The Investigation Statistic Report provides data on the number of intakes received, number of cases per disposition, number of finalized investigations, number of outstanding investigation reports, and number of deaths by disposition. This data is also broken down by investigations office. This report is accessible to senior investigators and investigations management. Now we'll walk through the Investigation Statistic Report in HCSIS. Let's navigate to the report screen by clicking QM and Reports. We'll expand the Investigations tab to see all investigations management reports available to us. In this view, HCSIS shows that the new Action Plan Resolution Status Report and Investigation Statistics Reports have been added to the list of investigations reports. Let's look at the Investigation Statistics Report. The only filters we have for the Investigation Statistics Report are the date filters and report format. Let's look at data from February 1st to March 1st. And let's download the report as a PDF. We'll access the report from downloads and open the file. On the report, there are a number of data points from the dates we selected. The breakdown of the data I mentioned earlier separated out into sections covering intakes by region, breakdown of cases by disposition, investigations report statistics, and deaths by disposition can be viewed here. Now we'll head back to our deck and go over existing management reports that will be updated in this release. As previously mentioned, the Outstanding Cases Report, Investigations Case Listing Report, and ACES report will be updated in the coming release. The Outstanding Cases Report will have 3 additional filters to help you isolate specific data points. These filters include disposition to filter entries by disposition, facilities only to isolate for outstanding cases at facilities, and deaths only to isolate for outstanding cases where a death occurred. This report is primarily accessed by investigators, senior investigators, the deputy director, and director. This screenshot shows the Outstanding Cases Report screen with the added filters for disposition, facilities only, and deaths only. The Investigations Case Listing Report will have an additional search filter, responsible site address, that will allow you to filter entries by the address of the responsible site. This report is accessible to all roles. In this screenshot, the added responsible site address filter is shown. The available options in the dropdown will pre-populate based on the provider selected, so a provider must be selected in order to select an option for the responsible site address. Just like other reports, the fields displayed in the Investigations Case Listing Report are dependent on whether it is generated as a Word, PDF, or Excel file. The Excel format includes the additional fields shown in the table in yellow on the right. The ACES report will have the column field Tracking Cases changed to Total Cases Closed in the new release. This report is primarily accessed by investigators, senior investigators, the deputy director, and director. Here is the screenshot of the ACES report displaying the changed column Total Cases Closed. The Investigation Reports column populates the number of investigation reports that were finalized by the listed investigator in the selected time frame. The Changes of Disposition column populates the number of disposition changes that were done for cases in the investigator's caseload during that selected time frame. Finally, the Total Cases Closed column is populated with the number of cases closed in the investigator's caseload in the selected time frame, and the total row at the bottom adds up the total of each column. Our last section of the training will go over important go-live dates and information. The new system changes launched on April 28, 2023. Cases created on April 28, 2023 or after will utilize the new HCSIS features we discussed during this training. You will not have to take action in HCSIS to prepare for these system changes. However, reviewing the communications that were sent and reference materials like this PowerPoint and user guides may help you in your transition to the updated system. The switchboard for cases created before April 28, 2023 will continue to follow the current screen progression. Cases created on or after April 28 will use the updated screen progression that we discussed to reach the switchboard. This also applies to the clipboard. The clipboard will only be available for cases created on or after April 28. After go live, you will need to upload an intake PDF in order to create a new case for that intake. However, uploading an intake PDF will not be required to link the intake to existing case or administratively close the intake. All existing intakes already linked to a case will not require an intake PDF to be uploaded. You will need to upload an initial response as a PDF after go live for cases created with the dispositions DDS to investigate and defer to law enforcement DDS to investigate. After go live, The screen flow and design changes for involved parties will apply to all cases regardless of their creation date. The following screens will utilize the pre-go-live processes if the case was created prior to April 28th. These screens are the intake detail screen, investigation checklist screen, disposition, printable summary, initial response, notices, and investigation report screens. As a final recap, intakes will be manually uploaded as read-only PDF documents and as CSV files. The screen flow for involved parties will be updated and certain fields will be added or changed for provider linking and administratively closing cases. Screened-in investigation reports will be manually uploaded as read-only PDF documents, while screened-out reports will continue to be created within HCSIS. The Covering Senior Investigator utility tool has replaced the manual process of assigning coverage for a senior investigator. New documents and management reports, such as the change in disposition request form and investigations statistics report, have been added to the system. The new system changes launched on April 28, 2023. Should you encounter any issues or have questions about HCSIS, the help desk representatives are available to document your issue and assign a ticket to the appropriate HCSIS business analyst, who can troubleshoot system errors and provide additional guidance regarding system functionality. It is advised that you send an email to the help desk to ensure your question is properly documented. After a business analyst is assigned to your issue, they will contact you to provide assistance. If you have any questions regarding the investigation's process and workflow, please reach out to your supervisor. A wide range of resources are available to help you with the transition to the new system updates. To access the Help tab in HCSIS for user guides and other documents, click the Help tab from the third-level menu in HCSIS. Then click on the document name hyperlink for your desired reference document. The document will be downloaded to your computer, and you can open it from downloads or save it elsewhere on your computer. You may also access this training recording via the DDS Learning website. Thank you for attending this training. We hope you find the new and enhanced features valuable as you continue to do your critical work and serve our communities.